Now, if you're anything like me, after a long ride or even a short ride, and especially after multiple rides, you're probably going to get a little bit stiff and a little bit sore. This can then lead to niggles and injuries further down the line. If only there was a way to alleviate that soreness and stiffness. Luckily there is, and today we're going to go through the 5 stretches every cyclist should be doing. Let's go. So as we're essentially in a hunched over position when cycling outdoors or on a trainer, there are certain muscles that can become pretty tight. This can lead to discomfort on your ride, injuries down the line, and also can impact our performance. If you're sat at the desk for long periods at work as well, this only aggravates the problem because you're basically hunched over at the desk as well. But there are a couple of great stretches we can do that specifically target those muscles that become tight during riding. And I know, we all lead busy lives. We barely have time to even just ride in itself, let alone stretch as well. But if you can incorporate some of these stretches into your routine, or at least at some point throughout your week, you're really going to reap the benefits in the long run. But before we hit the stretches, I've got to complete some horrible intervals. What fun. So I'll see you in a minute. That was a tough session to do first thing on a morning. It was about 6 3-minute intervals at 115% of my FTP, followed by 3 minutes rest. Pretty tough, but certainly ready to do some stretches and loosen off now. So we're going to go through 2 upper body stretches and 3 lower body stretches. And all we're doing with these stretches are just kind of putting ourselves in the opposite position we find ourselves when we are on the bike. So obviously shoulders are rounded over, hands are in front, neck's kind of leaning forward. So all these stretches are going to do are pull our shoulders back, open up the chest, shoulders, and then in terms of the lower body, kind of open up the hips and the hamstrings. But enough of the chat, let's get to the stretches. We're going to go through the stretches now, and then I'm going to finally sit down and we'll go through how long you should hold them, when you should do them, and how often you should do them. So do stay tuned for that as well. Let's hit the stretches. Okay, so stretch number 1 is called the chest wall stretch, and it kind of does what it says on the tin, stretches the chest up against the wall, but it also stretches out the shoulder and the bicep as well, so it kind of hits multiple areas. All you're doing for this one, placing your hand on the wall, fingers facing behind you, and then you're just twisting across the opposite way. So if my left arm's on the wall, I'm twisting across to the right, and you can even look to the right as well. That's just going to help stretch out the neck as well, which can get tight. Now play around with how high up your arm is on the wall. I feel it best here with my shoulder at about 90 degrees. Again, trying to keep the shoulder away from the ear. We're not trying to tense up. And you can bring your arm a little bit lower, see how that feels. Bring it a little bit higher up, see how that feels. Everyone's different. You might feel it better up there. Someone else might feel it better down here. Just find out what works best for you. If you really do feel it in the forearm, in the shoulder, and you're not really in the bicep, but you're not feeling it in the shoulder and chest, then just bend the elbow a little bit. That takes out the bicep and forearm, and then twist across the opposite way again. And hopefully that means you should feel it a little bit more in the chest and the shoulder this time. But play around with where feels best for you. Make sure you do both sides, and we're just wanting to feel slight tension. You're not trying to pull your shoulder out of the socket. So take it nice and easy, slight tension, big deep breaths, and relax into it. Okay, stretch number 2 is a lat stretch, and we've got 2 variations for this one. Go for the first one if you're a beginner, second one if you're more advanced. So this is going to help stretch out the shoulders, but also the lats, which kind of attach the arms to your back. And again, if we're in this position all the time, these are going to be pretty tight. So all we're doing for this one, grab an object, chair works really well, but you can use a sofa or whatever you've got around. Kneeling on the floor, put your knees underneath your hips. That's the best position for them. That means you can be able to get further down. And all we're doing, Keeping the elbows straight, we're driving the head and armpits through to the floor and relaxing as much as possible in this position and just trying to get lower over the time we're going to be holding the stretch. And if that's a little bit too easy or you're just not really feeling it too well, what we can do is make it even tougher by grabbing, I've got a foam roller here, but you can grab like a broom handle with 2 hands, or even like a sturdy bottle from your bike or something would work pretty well. But all that adding an object between your hands is going to do is going to externally rotate the shoulders. So again, when we're on the bike like this, our shoulders are quite internally rotated, so this stretch will help now externally rotated. So if you haven't done this one before, start in the first variation, but if you're a bit more advanced or want to give this one a go, feel free to give it a try. But instead of putting your hands on the chair this time, you're going to put your elbows on the chair, but hold this between them. And I'm just going to push as far as I can through. Again, knees underneath the hips, core nice and tight. And you can see I'm not going too low for this one because it's a little bit tougher. I can feel it more in my shoulders now as well. And if you want a little bit easier or a variation that's kind of in the middle of those two, you can just go ahead and use your elbows, but place your hands together. So it's going to be a bit more intense than just the lat stretch, but not as intense as with the foam roller or bottle or whatever you've got available. So hands together, pushing your head through. So I'd maybe give both these a go, see which one feels best for you, see which you feel more, and give that a try. Okay, so stretch number 3, and we've hit the upper body with the 2 stretches. We're now going to hit the lower body with 3 stretches. So the first one of those stretches has 2 variations. So again, depending on you, if you're a beginner or you're pretty tight, or you're a little bit more flexible, then you can go for the tougher one. But the first one is called the hip flexor stretch. All you're doing for this one is one leg in front of the other, knees at about 90 degrees on the front and the back. And then all we're doing for this one is trying to push our hips forward, but keeping your core nice and tight. Again, squeezing your bum might be tough after you've been on the bike. You want to try and squeeze your bum, squeeze your abs to make sure your hips are level. Common mistake with this stretch is people feel it in the lower back because they're pushing too far forward and arching their lower back. You want to keep your bum, your core squeezed. Imagine your hips are a bucket of water. If I'm all the way down here, then my hips are kind of tipped to the front. Water's going to be pouring out the front. Try and keep the hips level so that you are feeling it down the front of this back leg here, stretching off the hip flexor and the quad, looking straight forward. To make this one tougher, all you're going to do, elevate your back leg. This is called the couch stretch, or variation is called the couch stretch for obvious reasons. But you can use whatever you want for this one. The higher up your sofa is, the tougher it's going to be. The closer your heel is to your bum, the tougher it's going to be. So take this one really steadily. If you struggle with the first one, just go for that one. This will be a little bit tough. You can also place a cushion underneath your back leg if you feel it on your knee a little bit. Same principle, keeping the hips level, facing forward, core nice and tight, front knee at about 90 degrees, trying to keep the bucket level. To make it easier, just lower down. Well, you can't lower your sofa, but find something that's a little bit lower, or you can just kind of push back a little bit. Because my heel's getting close to my bum, means it's a little bit tougher for me. And again, make sure you do both sides, equal amount of time, keeping the hips as level as possible. Okay, stretch numero 4. We're nearly there, one more to go. So we worked on the front of the legs, worked on the hip flexors, and we'll now work on the hamstrings. If we're on the bike and pushing down with the quads, we also, especially if you're clipped in, you're going to be pulling up on the opposite side as well. So that's going to be utilizing the hamstring, which again can get pretty tight, especially if you're sat at a desk as well. So all you're going to do for this one is just try and sit back on one of your legs and extend one of your legs out. If you need to put a cushion underneath yourself or whatever you need to do to make it easier, you can do. You can even do this one stood up with one leg out at the front as well. But all you're gonna do is try and keep yourself nice and tall as possible, and just bend towards this front leg as much as you can. If you feel it in the calf, then what you can do is push the toes forward. That's gonna take the calf out a little bit, and you should feel it a little bit more in the hamstring here. And we're not trying to like bend over as far as we can. We're trying to keep our backs up nice and straight, coming as far forward as we can. And again, if you want a more intense stretch, you can pull the toes up. Feel it more in my calf now. That's pretty intense. But yeah, we should be feeling it down the back of this front leg. And again, make sure you do both sides equally, making sure we're feeling it here. But you might feel it slightly, a slight pulling sensation, and this can actually be due to a nerve in the back of the leg. So if you do feel it sort of a nervy pinch and a nervy pain instead of through the muscle, through the hamstring, then what you can do is, to make it easier, is just to bend the knee a little bit, and that means you're still going to stretch the hamstring, but you should be able to feel it a little bit more in terms of in the muscle as opposed to kind of a nervy pinching sensation. Same applies, you can point the toes to make it a little bit easier, and then just coming down as far as you can, trying to bring your chest as close to your knee as possible. Doesn't matter how far you can get, but give that one a go. Stretch number 4, hamstring stretch. So the final stretch. So we've kind of worked on the front and we've worked on the back, but we've yet to kind of work on the inside or the outside. So because cycling is like all in one motion, you know, our legs are only going up and down, we tend to only kind of work on the fronts and the backs. But that means that our hips can get quite tight because we're never having to rotate or kind of go in and out. So this next one will help kind of loosen up the hips in terms of the insides and the outsides, the kind of glutes and the adductors, and help kind of loosen those up a little bit so that your legs kind of can work a little bit better, a bit more efficiently, and your hips are a little bit less tight and stiff. For this one, you're going to try and get yourself in what we call a 90-90 position. So you want your front leg, you can put your hands on the floor, doesn't matter, support yourself however you need to. Front knee at 90 degrees, hips at about 90 degrees if you can, and then back knee at about 90 degrees as well. So you're kind of making this 90-90-90 shape. Again, like I said, if you're a little bit less flexible, you'd lean more on your arm this way. If you're a little bit more flexible, then you'll be able to kind of bring yourself up more upright here. And all we're doing for this stretch is kind of trying to bring our hips round, keeping our core nice and tight again, nice in one sort of straight line. There are 2 sort of stretches you can do from this position here then. All you're going to do, again supporting yourself with your hands, is come as far forward as you can over this front leg. You should start to feel it in your glutes here on the left hand side, or I'm on the left leg here, stretching out the glutes there. But what you can also do after you've held it on this side, you can then kind of twist round, again supporting yourself, and try and come towards this back knee here. And by me, again, not sort of hunching over, keeping nice and tall, by me pushing towards this back knee here, I can then feel it down the inside of this back leg. So kind of 2 stretches in one, wanting to make sure we do both sides. And even once you've done the sort of the front leg and the back leg, and you've done the same on the other side, you can even do this in kind of like a moving pattern. So trying to go from 90 degrees on one side, again, use your hands to support you, keeping your heels down, twisting, going to 90 degrees on the other side. So you can kind of keep switching from side to side. The aim is, when you're switching, to try and keep yourself as upright as possible. Obviously, if you're a little bit less flexible, you can lean backwards, makes it easier. But if you're trying to sort of increase your flexibility, as you do this more and more, try and keep yourself as upright as possible, eventually getting to a point where you can just do it with your arms out in front. So something to work on. So you kind of 3 stretches in one there, stretching out the glutes, the insides of the legs, and then kind of doing both with this moving motion. Give it a try. So there are still 3 questions which we need to answer, which are: how long should we be holding the stretches for? When should we be doing the stretches? And then how often should we be stretching? Any of the stretches we've gone through today should be held for between 30 seconds, anywhere up to 2 minutes. There's been lots of evidence to show that we need to do at least 15 to 30 seconds to have any long-lasting benefit of a stretch, but up to 2 minutes is going to be really beneficial. And the longer you can hold a stretch and the more time you have to stretch, obviously the more beneficial the stretching is going to be, and the longer the effects are going to last. Number 2, when should you be stretching? Really, there's not a bad time to stretch other than just before you go out on a ride. You don't want to stretch before you go out on a ride because you're going to be relaxing, stretching, elongating all the muscles, tendons and ligaments. And then when you go out on the bike and you try to hammer it and go for those sort of really hard efforts, your legs are going to be loose and a little bit like jelly. But the best times to do them straight after a bike ride, because you're more likely to remember to do them because you've just been out. But then any other time throughout the day is also good as well, or even on the days that you're not riding, it's also good to incorporate some stretching in as well. And then finally, number 3, how often should you be stretching? This is the age-old question. How much should I be doing? The answer really isn't set, and it's probably just a little bit more than you're doing now. If you're not doing any stretching now after your cycle rides or any stretching at all, then just incorporating it, once or twice a week is going to have some kind of beneficial effect. But ideally, after every ride if you can, and then, maybe on rest days or days you're not doing so much. As well as stretching out those muscles that become tight after a cycle ride or after multiple cycle rides, we also do need to strengthen the muscles on the opposing side of the body as well. So if we're in this sort of tucked position or hunched over, the muscles on the front become tight, as we know, but the muscles on the back also become weak as well. So please do drop a comment down below and let me know if you'd like me to do a video on strengthening exercises for cyclists as well. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you now have a couple of stretches that you can do that will help you be a bit more comfortable on the bike, help increase your performance, and also kind of stop those niggles that we all often get after long rides. But do pop a comment below, let me know what your favourite stretches are after a long ride, and please do subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.